Today we're going to be doing something different. Bonelabs came out, and I really wanted to do a video on it, but I don't really have time for it because I'm working on another project right now, which will come out probably by the end of this month. But for now, I just want to do like a little just like a talk about it, real time. I have a very loose script right in front of me, but aside from that, let's begin. Alright, so TLDR, if you get easily motion sick while playing VR, avoid the game at all costs. I don't get very motion sick in general, but there were definitely a couple sections where I was on that brink, and I could definitely see many more sections where it just doesn't work for someone who's easily motion sick. So if you get motion sick, I'd advise staying away from this game. Also, bonelabs is kind of a I'm gonna keep calling it bonelabs because bonelab is a stupid name. Bonelabs is better. So this is kind of a more love it or hate it kind of game. So if you did not like Boneworks, stay away from this game. This is basically like a spin-off of Boneworks. Is it better than Boneworks? Somewhat, somewhat not. The best way to describe is that Boneworks is a more story-driven game, like Half-Life 2, and like more, like a linear adventure. Bonelab is more like a Gmod experience with a little bit of Half-Life sprinkled in. So, if you were expecting like Boneworks 2 full-on sequel, more story, more all that, this unfortunately isn't it. With that out of the way, let's touch on the music. It was composed by Michael Wickoff, same as the Boneworks one, and holy shit, it is a good soundtrack. These are solid, quality jams that 100% help build the atmosphere of the game. I mean, many moments were just so much better because of it. I mean, a couple areas of the game, I just stopped and took my time and listened to the music, and my god, is it great. Best example of this was the actually arriving into the Bone Lab from there. That is one of my favorite sequences in this game. It was so well done. But overall, it is super high quality and very well done. Now for the graphics, I'm recording this on a PC, just a little disclaimer. I hate recording on the Quest, I hate the aspect ratio it comes out to be, but oh well. So I played both playthrough of the Quest native version and the PC version, and what I basically discovered is that the graphics differences are not that important. Basically, the Quest version just has some like super special high processing effects turned off, although I do like the PC versions just a little bit more. In a certain section at the end of the game, if you look up on the PC version, it makes sense, but if you look up on the Quest, you're kind of a little confused and it looks very jank, but that's pretty much about it. The built-in avatars like this one called Fast are usually pretty good. I mean, they look fine, they look good on the Quest too, it's not really toned down too much. I mean, also, the guns look pretty good too, so... Alright, so let's get down to the gameplay. The big selling point of Bonelabs and its previous game, Boneworks, was having, like, a physical body that actually interacts with objects like this. Like, you can't just clip your hand through the wall like you can in, like, Pavlov or something. So that's a pretty big selling point, and it is kind of a love it or hate it scenario, because it can be very jank at times because it's not 100% perfect, nothing is, but if you do like it, it's pretty much exactly what you're looking for in a VR game. It can also be pretty nauseating, like I said earlier. I did not notice a lot of it because I have way too many hours in this stupid fucking headset I have strapped to my head. But if you are relatively inexperienced in VR, I would advise having a lot more time before you tackle games like Bonelab and Boneworks. I mean, it still took me a while to get used to the physical body and all that, but compared to the Boneworks version, I think this one's just a bit more polished. Like, stuff like climbing and hoisting yourself up on ledges is easier, but there's still plenty of bugs, like legs getting stuck on nothing randomly. But the big shtick of Bonelab is the avatars, and it's fine and all. I mean, look at this. You can change with this. This is called the body log, and you just grab it and slide it around, and you can choose whatever one you want. I have some pretty decent ones here, and you can swap it instantly. Don't ask me why the Jack Cooper one flashbangs you. I have no clue why. Yeah, and then just swap back to another. I do like this mechanic, but I don't like it in terms of the gameplay, in terms of how they, like, implemented it, because some levels require you to swap to certain avatars, and those levels kind of suck a little bit. Like, the shorter avatars are nearly impossible to use. I mean, don't get me started on the short level, where you have to use the little fucking cat guy. Hated that level. My hands kept getting stuck on the fucking floor. It was awful. Yeah, I didn't like that level. And also another level right after that, that if you played the game already, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Fuck that level. But past those levels, I pretty much ended up just using fast for the rest of the game, because speed is fun. In terms of content, bonelab is more like a melting pot of different stuff to do. Like, the arena is pretty fun to mess around in. It's just like an endless mode, kind of, where you can just do non-stop combat, and it's pretty fun. Attack trial mode is also pretty fun. It's just running through like a warehouse or something while you're shooting the fuck out of everyone, and it's all about speed. I like speed. The parkour mode I'm not so much a big a fan of, because it's more about platforming and I'm not very good at that. Sandbox mode, classic, standard sandbox. You can spawn anything you'd like, you get a couple dev tools to go with it. Thumbs up for me. The experimental section is more of like miscellaneous minigames that didn't fit into the other categories, like the big bowling, but they're pretty fun. They're fun to mess around with. Hope to see more from this. And finally, the mod section, but we'll talk about that later. I want to talk about some more stuff. Alright, so on top of all the stuff around the Bone Lab, there's also that door you unlock after you just mess around with 3 of them. Those are the main story missions, along with some over there. Those are alright. I mean, the first 12 levels are just pretty much teaching you how to play the game, and then those levels are actually, like, the game. And it's a bit of a shame that they put more effort into that section of the game instead of the more, like, you know, fun part of the game, because, I don't know, now that we have all the concepts, I wish there was just a bit more, like, more to it instead of just the 2 levels over there. The level design is also much more constrained and linear feeling compared to the original Boneworks. Like, you don't crawl through the big open, like, cities like you did before. You're kind of constrained to more, like, hallways and such, like you're going through the maintenance tunnels, so it's a little less fun in that aspect, but the later levels are pretty alright. I mean, the way the levels were designed were probably to focus around the Oculus launch of the game, which can't really handle that much processing, and the smaller rooms, less processing, yada yada yada. But overall, the story levels are not the best, but sometimes the worst, but overall it's a bit enjoyable to me. Something to note, however, this isn't 100% an excuse, but most of this game was developed over COVID, and they are a relatively small team. This definitely does feel like a passion project in some areas, like the minecart sequence later in the game, and all these modes around me. I just can't help but wish there was more. Now, the story in the game is one of those that could just be entirely removed and it would not make a difference in the slightest. It makes more sense than the Boneworks story, because that one was a bit more vague in terms of details, but the Bone Lab story is just so much weaker overall. I mean, it could have been a great opportunity to actually build upon, you know, the void and the simulation itself, but oh well. It turns out to be more of a side story than anything, which kind of sucks, but yeah. Now, for the mods. This is pretty much the biggest selling point of this game. Unlike Boneworks, which wasn't designed for mods in the beginning, and people just kind of force their way into the mods, Stress Level Zero has fully embraced the modding community, and that's their biggest thing. They have built-in mod menus, and but the best part is, instead of being stuck to, like, you know, but the best part is, instead of just sticking to just the Steam Workshop, you can add your own custom repositories that you can select from with a built-in menu. However, these custom repositories don't always have the best mods, and you have to be really careful about which ones you do add, and adding them to the game in the first place is a bit of a pain in the ass, especially on the Quest version. PC version's fine, but the Quest, you have to pull some hijinks shenanigans to it. Kind of sucks, but oh well. What I do wish is that they made their own, like, repository system themselves and have players submit to that so that they can have like an official repository, and you can also add your own if you would like, because in its current state you kind of gotta finagle your way through it. Or in the future they can pick like one mod repository site and like fully endorse that one so that it's not the only one, but it's like the main one, and they can like ship it with the game so that it's just simpler for people who aren't as technically experienced. Now, for actually developing the mods, Stress Level Zero has created their own SDK for Unity. It is based on a 2021 version of Unity, so it has a lot of the more recent features instead of stuck on like a 2018 version, so that's nice. But my only problem with the SDK right now is that it's not developed in the slightest. Currently, you can only make levels, certain props, and avatars. That is it. I believe they're planning to add many more features to the SDK, but in its current state, it is very limiting in terms of scope. So I really wish Stress Level Zero had fully developed the SDK before releasing the game so that people could just hit the ground running with whatever the fuck they wanted to make. But in its current state, I can't really recommend you start developing for it right now. But so far, the modding scene is already looking pretty promising in terms of like content mods. Now, with the avatar system in the game, it is more catering towards the VR chat side of the VR community. There's frankly going to be a lot of very weird avatar mods flooding mod repositories. And the mod repository system is pretty primitive right now. Like, you can't even search for anything, you can't filter anything. I would really like to be able to filter out the more weird mods instead of the ones we have now. Since this game just released and they plan to continue support and development for it, what do I want to see? I want to see more SDK support. I want to see people be able to create whatever the fuck they want in here and pretty much make their own Gmod. While that's a pretty big goal to aim towards, if they just keep at it and keep adding more options and variety and more like do whatever you want to the SDK, I would love that. If they don't though, the game will sheerly crash and burn very quickly. I want more content down the line, more minigames, more official levels, hopefully, more props to mess with, just stuff like that to keep those who want to stay more official a little more invested in the game over time. Like, user-generated content is completely fine, I'm fine with that, you just have to throw your own stuff into the mix every now and then. Now, Stress Level Zero, I strongly suggest you make this game multiplayer. While I did just complain about the whole catering to the VR chat side of things, if you were to make this game multiplayer, like a Gmod scenario where you have like servers and such and you can go into custom worlds and all that, this game could single-handedly overthrow VR chat entirely. Especially after VR chat pretty much killed their entire modding scene with the adding of easy anti-cheat to the game. But that's a pretty big ask considering this game was not designed for multiplayer, and that would be a huge technical challenge. But in the future, if they could do that, that would be fucking incredible. But mostly, since this is supposed to be more like Gary's Mod sandbox experience, those games are much more fun when you have friends to play with. If I could play with my friends in VR Gmod and just dick around for hours, I would kill for that. Most likely Stress Level Zero is not going to do that. However, I have confidence in the modding community, because they were somehow able to add multiplayer to Boneworks. I don't even know how you do that, but if you could do that for bonelab, oh my god. But if you like Boneworks and want more of like a sandbox experience, I would hold off for like a month or two and then pick up bonelabs, because that will absolutely be worth your purchase once the SDK is more developed and modders can actually do what they want. Anyways, that's pretty much all for this talk. I plan to have the other video out by the end of October, but it might be out sooner if I'm not a lazy bastard, so just keep your eyes out for that, and I will see you later. Also, go follow my Twitter.